but never ever effective.
The TGA knows that myocarditis was a side effect from this vaccine, and yet they didn't tell the Australian public.
Peer-reviewed and published papers that show that COVID injections were granted approval under fraudulent circumstances, do not comply with good manufacturing process, and were made with a high level of contaminants that should have caused a batch to fail testing, are responsible for fatal adverse events numbering far more than the Dane database has tracked, let alone the pharmaceutical salesmen at the TGA will admit. And 4, are causing serious damage at rates that make a tragic joke of TGA guidance.
Australia cannot afford the risk of another crisis, one that would eclipse even the devastating thalidomide disaster. We must protect the health of all Australians, and that requires transparency, accountability and action.
The misinformation that's out there, which is based largely upon conspiracy theories.
An unbelievable case of cognitive dissonance.
Conspiracy theory rubbish. The town of Port Hedland should stick to its knitting.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. If oxygen is required, a mask will drop from the unit above your head. Whatever you do, don't wear it. It is a real honour to stand here before you all tonight, representing people who are waking up and smelling a rat in the cheese factory. We have seen it, we have smelt it, and we've come to deal with it. Welcome to the great debate between the Premier Roger Cook, seated down at the end of the row, and the town of Port Hedland. I came this close to going along with the mandate and getting the Pfizer jab. And if it wasn't for my wife Michelle saying, have you done your due diligence yet, your risk-benefit, I would have probably done it. But ever since I started digging into what's going on, I cannot get the stench of this out of my nose. And so from then on, I have been awakened in fright at just how sinister this stuff has become. It's not about being right. It's not about, I told you so. The question I would ask the Premier, if he were here, and he is in spirit, in actual fact, you know where he is tonight? He's in Port Hedland. Premier, the venue was here. We were coming to you. You didn't have to go up there. Minister Sanderson, welcome. Well, hopefully they'll arrive very shortly. But the question I'd like to ask both of those individuals, if they were here, I pose to you tonight. If you thought there was a chance that someone was tampering with your DNA or your immune system, would you like to know about it? Now, wouldn't you think that you would? So this is not about us being right or wrong. In fact, I'm one of many who pray like crazy that we're wrong, because if we're right, a lot of people we care about are going to die. But since the investment to laboratories around the world have revealed that DNA does. Well, While Premier Roger Cook is wearing reflective vests and hard hats, and at this moment is up opening the marina at Port Hedland, councillors who were elected representatives of the people decided to do what they were elected to do, and that is represent them. And that's what they did. And it is beholding on every elected representative, whether you're local, state or federal, to represent your people and care for them. So grassroots is where it's happening, and Port Hedland is showing the way, and other councils are following suit. If they won't come to the table, we'll bring the table to them. We have an amazing lineup for you tonight, an incredible lineup. It's been a privilege over the last 3.5 years with my friend John Larder. Please give him a hand. Johnny, I know you're in Adelaide waiting for me to get there tomorrow so we can do another gig in Adelaide tomorrow, mate, and I wish you were here, and so does everyone else that's here. Incredible man. We've interviewed survivors. We've interviewed those who have lost loved ones from vaccine injury. We're striving to be a voice for the voiceless because no one's listening to them, and we will keep doing that as long as we have breath in our lungs. We will keep doing it, because the voiceless deserve to be heard. So we have an incredible lineup for you tonight. You already know who you've come to see. There's been a slight change. Rebecca Barnett is unwell, but we have the wonderful Dr. Marianne Damasi, who's flown over from the East Coast to be here tonight to take her place. Sparing the legal fight against the things that we struggle with at this time has been one man who's taken the legal fraternity to another level. He's actually dragged it out of the gutter where most of us see it. Let's be honest. The legal fraternity has not covered itself in glory. But one man has done incredible things. He has sacrificed so much in the last few years to protect the innocent. And that barrister, who had retired several years ago and has been more active than ever, struggling with exhaustion and ill health, continues in the fight. He is a man who I admire, and his name is Julian Gillespie. Please welcome him to the stage. Now, just briefly before I hand the microphone over to Julian, I want to also welcome another guest who I welcome at every event I ever speak at, and that is the Holy Spirit. Dear Lord Father in heaven, the great south land of the Holy Spirit needs you more than ever. Some believe and some don't, but we need all the help we can get. So we ask you to be with us, to guide and lead us, and to take us on the next journey. We pray in Jesus' holy name, and I hope everyone says amen. God bless you. Julian Gillespie.
Yes, sorry about that. I just have to say thank you to begin with for that very rousing welcome. This is the biggest room I've played in the last 3.5 years. My legal efforts wouldn't have occurred without Katie Ashby-Copens, who is with us here tonight as well. And of course, Peter Pham, who joined us in the earlier campaigns, but had to attend to family life, a new family for him. So anyway, let me, yes, I am quite unwell, so if I do start coughing quite outrageously, just give me a few moments and then I should be able to right the ship and come back to the script, as they say. But I'll launch straight into it because time is of the essence, and I'll just see if I've got this thing working correctly. Oh yes, sorry about that. Oh, sorry about that. Okay. So, okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is a privilege to stand before you tonight at the Great Debate, an event that has brought together some of the most courageous voices in our nation, each of us united by one common purpose: to uncover the truth and demand accountability for the unprecedented betrayal of public trust we've witnessed in recent years. This is the name of my talk tonight, the betrayal. I do, however, note a certain absence up here on the stage. It's telling, isn't it, that Premier Roger Cook and Health Minister Amber Jade Sanderson, despite their grandstanding about the safety and effectiveness of these gene-altering substances, didn't think the possibility of national DNA contamination was sufficiently worthy of their time tonight. Apparently, they couldn't muster the courage, or perhaps the evidence, to bring along their overwhelming proof that myself and my esteemed fellow presenters here are nothing more than cookers, conspiracy theorists, or amateurs in need of a crash course in knitting. Let that sink in. A Premier who, as Health Minister, actively urged and coerced parents to inject their children and babies with these substances cannot find it within himself to face the people he once led into harm's way. Instead, they hide, refusing to answer legitimate questions about the health and well-being of every Western Australian, especially the children they swore to protect. Tonight, my focus is clear: the synthetic DNA contamination in Pfizer and Moderna's COVID-19 drugs. This is not merely a scientific anomaly. It is a national crisis, one that affects every Australian family, every individual who place their trust in our public health system. The findings of synthetic DNA contamination are now irrefutable. From Kevin McKernan, the former Director of Research for the Human Genome Project, to David Speech's Australian lab work, to Professor Philip Buchholz, groundbreaking cancer research in South Carolina, and now the world's leading molecular biologist and also Doctor of Medicine, Dr. Didier Ruart, together with Dr. Jessica Rose, Dr. David Wiseman, Dr. Maria Gucci, Professor Koenig, Bridget, and we've heard German colleague Dr. Jürgen Kirchner. Each has confirmed the presence of excessive levels of synthetic DNA contamination in the Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 products, vials spanning the globe, and therefore contamination affecting the global population. Kevin McKernan's research, way back in February of 2023, the 16th of February to be exact, was when Kevin first transmitted to the world, Houston, we have a problem. On that day, Kevin stepped forward to say, in effect, the world appears to have been injected with excessive levels of synthetic DNA contamination. Dr. Speech corroborated these findings in Australian vials, finding levels up to 150 times above old regulatory limits for naked DNA. Professor Koenig confirmed similar numbers in Germany, and Didier Ruart's team recently found strikingly similar contamination in France. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not a regional issue, it is a global catastrophe. Let me share one particularly chilling finding from Professor Buchholz's research. This contamination is not merely present, it integrates into natural human DNA. Worse, recent studies, that's by Kevin and his crew, suggest it may also self-replicate. I must say that term again and slowly. Self-replicate. This stuff is living independently. We are potentially dealing with a biogenic time bomb, a contamination capable of altering human genomes with devastating consequences forever. In Australia, the Therapeutic Goods Administration, the TGA, the very body tasked with ensuring the safety of our medical products, has failed us miserably. On October 18, the TGA released a statement dismissing these findings as misinformation. But this statement has been systematically dismantled in a thorough analysis co-authored by investigative journalist Rebecca Barnett alongside scientists and legal experts. That analysis highlights 14 separate false or misleading claims made by the TGA. And who within the TGA has stepped forward to defend this statement? No one. No names, no credentials, just facialist bureaucracy hiding behind its logo. Contrast that with the calibre of scientists who have raised the alarm: McKernan, Rose, Gotchi, Wiseman, Koenig, Kirchner, Speecher, Raoult, Buchholz, and many more, and many others, with their names on the public record. The disparity is glaring. Yet, instead of engaging with these experts, our government doubles down on deflection. Health Minister Mark Butler did not address the evidence presented by Russell Broadbent in his October 29 letter. Instead, his Chief of Staff, a bureaucrat with no scientific expertise, responded with yet another echo of the TGA's discredited statement. Ladies and gentlemen, this is not incompetence. It is a deliberate cover-up. This crisis is compounded by our legal system's complicity. The federal court is actively suppressing the GMO case, a legal battle that exposes how these drugs meet the definition of genetically modified organisms under Australian law, which, while being serious criminal offences on the part of Pfizer and Moderna, involves in the result the injecting of GMOs into millions of Australians without their giving informed consent. This is wholesale medical negligence that falls at the feet of the Liberal and Labor parties and Butler's Health Department. But instead of hearing more on those issues, we instead have to deal with Justice Helen Roth's recent actions to obstruct this case, a chilling reminder of the erosion of judicial independence in this country. And when complaints were lodged against Justice Roth, Chief Justice Deborah Morter dismissed them without meaningful inquiry, or, in the view of the reasonable onlooker, another cover-up. This is not justice, it is a betrayal of our democratic principles, the betrayal and destruction of the doctrine of separation of powers, and a wholesale burning to ashes of the social contract. Thankfully, there are glimmers of hope. Local councils like the town of Port Hedland, West Tamar, Ceduna have taken bold steps, passing motions to inform their communities and health practitioners of these contamination findings. They have called on the Prime Minister to suspend these drugs and launch an independent investigation. Our other councils are soon to follow in their footsteps. This grassroots momentum must grow. Every council in this country has a legal, ethical and moral duty to act to protect their communities where the federal government has failed and continues to intentionally fail them, indeed abandon them. So every Australian must join the effort, writing to councils, joining organisations. There we go, let me catch up here. Joining organisations like Australians for Science and Freedom and Inform Me and demand change. It's a shout out to you, Chloe Geddes. So where do we go from here? First, these drugs must be suspended immediately. Next, an independent inquiry, free from government interference, must confirm the extent of the contamination. All retained samples must be tested, and every Australian who received these drugs must be informed and monitored, and every available medical treatment made available when needed. Lastly, we need systemic reform. Canberra has become a malignant force, prioritising political expediency, foreign influences and the wishes and demands of unelected organisations over public welfare. These entities, met with disdain, loathing and distrust by Australians, appear to serve commercial interests and totalitarian outcomes before ever considering, let alone prioritising, the wishes of the Australian people. It is time to rethink the role of the federal government in our lives. As a nation, we must reclaim our sovereignty, our health and our democracy. To those in this room and the thousands watching online, let me say this: inaction is complicity. Every day that we wait, we let this betrayal deepen. The stakes could not be higher. This is about the health and future of our children, the survival of our freedoms, and the very essence of what it means to be Australian. History will judge this generation by what we do right now. If we choose to stay silent, to stay seated, we leave our children a legacy of cowardice and neglect. But if we rise, if we fight for the truth, if we demand accountability, if we reclaim our democracy, we give our children something far greater, a chance at a future defined not by betrayal, but by courage and conviction. The time for waiting has long passed. The time for action is now. Write to your councils, demand they protect their communities, join hands with those who are stepping forward, often at great personal cost, to speak the truth. Challenge the disgusting silence of Canberra and let the echo of your voices shake the walls of every institution that has failed us. We are not just fighting for answers. With the many contamination results, the need for answers has nearly passed. What is now required is action. But in the process, this fight, this war, to see honesty prevail and the sick and wounded and dead cared for and future generations protected, we are fighting for the soul of our nation and for every generation that follows. Thank you.
Julian, before you go and we bring up our next guest, what's astounded me about you in particular and others like some of the politicians that who have championed our cause, Gerard Rennick in particular, he's a finance guy. The amount of delving that you've had to do, the research you've had to do to uncover the things you've uncovered, I can't believe that you've had to extend your knowledge so far about virology and all the other sciences involved. Has this gone deeper than you thought in your wildest dreams at the very beginning of this journey for you?
I'm not surprised. Many people don't know that I'm actually a dropout medical student. And prior to that, I also studied what's called in the trade nuclear biology. That's everything to do with what goes inside, happens, inside the nucleus of cells. And when I got the first whiff of something going wrong with these vaccines in 2021, realising that they were completely out of date, and then started scratching around and seeing all these genetic components to them, I thought, holy crap. And so it's unfortunately nearly every alley that we suspected would go down, it's gone down there. And then we were saying the legal team, Katie and Peter and myself, were saying in early 22, watch excess deaths. We couldn't make that call then, but then it became public and official. And the idea of genetic integration and the idea of self-replicating, Well, we made those calls internally, and unfortunately it's all coming true. We are fortunately assisted by some of the world's greatest scientists, and Kevin McKernan is just amazing, and there's a lot more work going on there in the background, many more announcements to be made in due course when the science is steady enough to present, so it can't be trolled and pulled down. So it's our new reality, and we can't escape it. We just have to adapt to it. We've got plenty of good medical friends who are here to help us do that in this country as well.
God bless you, Julian. Thank you so much. Give him a hand. Thank you. I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome those hundreds of thousands and perhaps millions of people who will be watching this online around the world. It's streaming at this moment on hundreds of platforms through various outlets around the world, and they're all watching to see what's going on because a little town in Port Hedland decided to dig its heels in. I have also been very remiss because there is a tradition that happens in Australian gatherings that I did not fulfil when I stepped up to the stage. I would like to honour the traditional owners of this land. Mrs. Gina Reinhardt, Mr. Twiggy Forrest, Mr. Mark McGowan, and the CFMEU. And I have the privilege of being married to a wonderful lady who descends from the Balladon mob in the Noongar country out near York, and Michelle's given me approval to say what I've just said. We have been witness to many, many videos of politicians standing up, speaking the best, most statesman-like speeches to empty chambers in Canberra. We see speeches that rock the country by incredible people who are just ordinary, everyday people who decided to step into politics. I recently considered running for the Senate myself. I asked a dear friend of mine what it was really like, because he's a senator. I said to him, I know it'd be interesting and all that sort of stuff, but what's it really like? His reply to me was very honest. He said, Hoodie, it's like pushing a wheelbarrow full of cow manure through treacle. And I won't say who that man was, but I tell you what, there's one powerhouse that we have pumped the air for so many times when we've witnessed his deliveries in Canberra and his deliveries everywhere else that he speaks. He may not be as tall as I am, but he packs twice the punch. I would like you all to give a warm welcome to One Nation Senator for Queensland, Senator Malcolm Roberts.
Well, look at all the truthers. This is the core to democracy. We saw at the start of, I think it was last week or this week that's just underway, the misinformation and disinformation bill smashed. I've been chasing that bill since Morrison first brought it out 4 years ago. I belled the cat right then. We've been chasing it ever since. Senate estimates, special hearings in the Senate repeatedly for 4 years. But what did it was the people of Australia bombarded the Labor Party and the Liberal Party. That's the core to a democracy. We've also had some very good news with an orange-haired man being elected to presidency in the United States. I want to tell you a little story. Found myself sitting in the car a couple of weeks ago. I was listening to the radio and the news came on, and they said that RFK Jr. has been nominated to be the Health and Human Services Secretary in the United States. And I started crying because I realised that this is one of the best steps that humans have made ever. And I felt for the thousands, the millions of people that Big Pharma has killed in trials that are just murder. And they've captured the American country, which is was one of the best countries in the world, and they've taken it down the hill. I want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for being awake. And some of you, I want to thank you for maybe not being quite awake, but willing to be awakened. That takes enormous courage, enormous courage. I want to thank you for making an effort for Australia, for Western Australia, and for Port Hedland. And for your community, that's what this is all about, and for your family and for yourself. We are together at the front line of an information war, an indoctrination war. But I want you to remember one thing from tonight, from me. The people are in charge. Always remember that. We serve you. The misinformation, disinformation bill, the cash ban bill that my staff used to, both the Labor Party and Liberal Party passed it through the lower house when it came. I won't go into the details, I haven't got time. But we contacted the grassroots members of the Labor Party and the Liberal Party, and they put so much heat on the senators that it was consigned to a committee inquiry. It was there for months, so I moved a motion to get it off the Senate books, and the Senate passed it. So that came from the people, not from me. I want to acknowledge the people who've organised tonight. I want to acknowledge The Light's Robin and Scott from The Light. The Light is a wonderful newspaper. Get hold of it. I want to thank and congratulate Adrian McRae and the Port Hedland Council and Julian. He does so much work. We're going to hold an inquiry in our office. We've got crossbench senators coming and Russell Broadbent coming. We've got 8 of us from federal parliament. We'll be interviewing politicians, lawyers, some doctors, but mainly politicians and lawyers to put more heat on the government. I want to thank Ian Brighthope and acknowledge Ian Brighthope. You've exposed the SV40 contamination, the E. coli contamination, the endotoxic contamination, synthetic DNA contamination in the shots. Everyone knows about that. I'm not going to talk about that. I want to thank Russell for sending that letter to the Prime Minister, and Julian for drafting it, as I understand, and also for helping us draft the support letter to Russell. Because, as Julian said, we got crap back from Butler. Absolute crap. No evidence at all. No empirical scientific data, no logical scientific points. This is very important for people's health and safety, for science. I haven't got time to talk tonight about this, but science is absolutely essential for freedom. Absolutely essential for freedom. This is very important for accountability of MPs and for democracy itself. Now, Adrian asked me to talk about death data, so I'm going to whistle through that very quickly. Death data itself, the number of deaths, doesn't really mean much if the population is growing or varying. You've got to look at mortality rates per 100,000 people to standardise against an increased population. The 21st century, the last 24 years, we've had mortality rates declining. 2020 was the lowest this century. 491 deaths per 100,000 people. That mortality took a sharp swing up in 2021 and 2022 because of the COVID injections. Not because of COVID injections. Queensland and Western Australia, we believe, were the only two places in the world where the people were injected before COVID arrived. So we know it wasn't COVID, it was the injections. We know that for sure. But what's worse is that the mortality rate is not going back down. There's been a slight decrease, but it's been sustained above the long-term trend, above the upper range, and around about 8 to 10,000 deaths. But the mortality rate is now higher and sustainably higher. It's not going away. It's very closely correlated with injections, COVID injections, especially the booster. I'm going to read a quote from the paper called The Correlation Between, this is a peer-reviewed scientific paper, The Correlation Between Australian Excess Deaths by State and Booster Vaccinations by D.E. Allen, School of Mathematics and Statistics, University of Sydney. The abstract, summarising the paper, the study explores the relationship by Australia's state between COVID booster vaccinations and excess deaths. Quite clear. There is evidence of a very strong correlation in ordinary least squares regression analysis. Cross-validation tests support the strength of the regression relationship. The results suggest that it would be worthwhile to explore these associations in greater depth, as it is an important public health issue. If they cared, they would do it, but they don't. There's been a significant deterioration in health, heart problems, cancer, brain, reproduction organs, all major organs in the body. And I'll get onto this one in a minute. The renin-angiotensin system has been dysregulated and has been crippled by the spike protein and by the endotoxin, then E. coli, causing disease. The Greens, the crossbench senators, the Labor Party opposed Senator Rennick's access to the data. They don't care. The Greens, the crossbench, the Labor Party exposed my request for an order for production of documents because we got a Freedom of Information request back, and it wasn't just odd words taken out, it was the whole page just blackened. For 100 pages, black. They've released that material, that material in the public, but we still couldn't get it through the Senate. They don't care. They're hiding. So let's talk now about the spike protein. COVID, and in particular the COVID virus and the spike protein, was supposed to be the killer, wasn't it? The spike protein was the killer. The experts initially said the spike protein in the COVID-genic. The TGA knowingly and willfully approved, recommended and forced on people novel injections that convert human cells into manufacturing spike protein. That's what they did. I asked a question in Senate estimates 2 weeks ago. Said to the TGA, my first question, is the COVID spike protein pathogenic? No, Senator Roberts. Here are some of the papers, some going back to 2003, 2005, some going back 4 weeks, brand new, that discuss the spike protein and how it cripples people, or rather how it cripples the renin-angiotensin system. And then that allows threats to come in, diseases to come in and take over. The spike protein is pathogenic. There are many peer-reviewed studies that show spike protein is dangerous. As I said, some go back to 2003. Dr. Carla Lehman's paper from 2024, just 4 weeks ago, is very clear. The spike protein, whether it's from COVID or the more concentrated and more powerful and more deadly COVID injections, dysregulates the renin-angiotensin system. That disables the human immune system, and that affects major organs across our body. Cancers, heart attacks, myocarditis, pericarditis, the brain, the organs, the gonads. It's like one domino falling and the rest of the body is opened up and all the dominoes fall. That domino is the renin-angiotensin system and it's crippled by the spike protein. The spike protein can disable the human reproduction system. Think about what that means. If you kill a few million people, a few 100 million people, but they can still reproduce, the rest of them, you've got no problem. I mean, you're not going to kill too many people. You're not going to wipe out the species. But if you disable the reproduction systems, then you're going to do enormous damage. The spike protein in SARS-CoV-2 is human engineered. It is human engineered. The science is abundantly clear. It had to come from a lab, and it was deliberately designed to do what it's doing. That is abundantly clear. The money that came from the Fauci and some of the science agencies in America, medical agencies and health agencies in America, and the Department of Defense in America. They've had elaborate cover stories which spread in an orchestrated attempt to hide this scientifically proven fact and to ridicule and smear those who found the truth. But that's not all. We've got SV40 and E. coli plasmid contamination, and that's deadly. That's in the shots. We've got lipid nanoparticles, dangerous, deadly. That's in the shots. We've got experimental gene therapy treatments using mRNA, yet they didn't even get Office of Gene Technology approval. Worse, Pfizer tested the mRNA injections with product from a method 1, very strictly regulated. That removes DNA contamination. The injections used on the public used a second method, large-scale manufacturing process that did not remove DNA contamination, and they knew it. The TGA admitted, when I questioned them about this in March of 21, that they did no testing of the novel mRNA injections. They relied on the American Food and Drug Administration, which has been captured by Big Pharma. But even before the TGA replied to me in Senate estimates, we knew that the FDA in America did no testing itself. They relied on Pfizer. And Pfizer shut down its test by injecting everyone so there's no control group because there were so many deaths in their testing. Pfizer also knew that it would cause certain problems, but they went ahead and did it. This is genocide. It's homicide. And these people are culpable. They're complicit. As I said, now I want to give you some hope. I could keep talking about this, but that's enough. You've got the message. They deliberately designed this to kill people. I didn't realize that until probably 4 or 5 weeks ago. But the number of papers that describe the spike protein is huge. And the TGA asked me for them. So guess what I'll be doing next Senate estimates. So there are possible treatments. Now I'm making it very clear, I'm not giving medical advice, I'm not a doctor, and every person is an individual. But there are some pharmaceutical drugs called ACE inhibitors that end in the suffix opril, O-P-R-I-L. For example, lisinopril. Then there's the angiotensin receptor blockers, ARBs, that end in the suffix sartan. For example, candesartan and losartan. But people are very reluctant to take pharmaceutical drugs these days. And they don't work with every person. But there are non-pharmaceutical herbal medicines mentioned in peer-reviewed papers. Astragalus root, saffron, L-citrulline, which is an amino acid in watermelon, producing L-arginine and nitrous oxide. There's also exposure to heat, some people recommend. Hot baths, saunas or warm weather. Hyperbaric treatment. Maybe the COVID protocols will help. Ivermectin, zinc, vitamin D intravenous, I don't know. But this indicates they don't care about us. They don't care, they won't acknowledge the injection injuries, and they won't look for treatment because these bastards are to blame. I think so. I've only got a minute left, so I just want to say that we will be fighting to expose this for the same reasons that Julian Gillespie is fighting. We've got to have truth. Truth is fundamental to democracy, it's fundamental to accountability, it's fundamental to justice. Otherwise they'll do it again. And the second thing I want to finish with is we're fighting for compensation for all the people that are injured. Cruelly injured. I've said it before and I'll say it again. We need a Royal Commission now. I will continue until we hound these bastards down. We want justice, compensation, trust and accountability. Why? Because humans care, we care, you care. That's why you're here tonight. Thank you so much.
mate. Senator, we've been rejoicing over the failure of the MAD bill, but then we're confronted with the social media bill, which is designed to protect our under 16-year-olds. How come these legislations are racing through so quickly without any Senate kind of examination? They're being forced through. And how can we trust a government who forcibly, let's face it, by means of mandates, injects our kids with something they don't need, that they're really interested in their online safety? How can we believe that?
And how can we say that kids at 14, 15, 16 are okay to have puberty blockers in their own decision, but then take them off social media? Look, there's a suite of these bills. It's not just the misinformation and disinformation. It's not just the online safety bill, the under 16 banning. There's the identity verification bill that Labor put through. There's the digital identity bill that Morrison started and Albanese pushed through. So there you've got 5 bills. There's another one, and that is not a bill but an effort that's coming under the Liberal Party of Morrison and Turnbull, the Reserve Bank of Australia investigating cryptocurrencies, a digital currency, connected to a global digital currency. Now here you put it together. You've got 5, 6 pieces of legislation or work that come together and form the social credit system. Even if they don't introduce social credit, they form a control system. The second thing is, Liberal and Labor are working together on this. That is abundantly clear. These things didn't happen in the last 2 weeks. They've been going on for at least 4 years and longer. And the Liberals built it. Now here's an example for you, Hoodie. Because of the way the people kicked up a stink about the misinformation and disinformation bill and the online safety bill, we had 1 day notice on making submissions. And the people of Australia flooded the joint and knocked it off with 15,000 submissions. And the Labor Party was under so much pressure because, again, the only pressure that they really take notice of are the people. So they were very reluctant to gag or guillotine these bills. So when was it? Yesterday, the Labor Party moved a motion in the morning saying that they would bring in just over 30 bills. The Greens, the crossbench senators, myself, Pauline, all spoke about them disrupting democracy, treating the people with complete disrespect. So the Labor Party lost that motion. But they came back, and the same with a different list that excluded 3 migration bills and the online safety bill. Excluded it. So we went, great. But then we thought, true to form, they will come back, they'll buy off a couple of the crossbench senators and the Greens and they'll get what they want. But it didn't happen that way. No, they came back with something that excluded the online safety bill. So the Greens, ourselves and the crossbench senators supported it. But the Liberal Party leader, Simon Birmingham, came up and moved an amendment to put the online safety bill in it. In the guillotine. So it was guillotined. These two are working together. They're the 2 cheeks of the same arsehole. That's what's happening. But that's only 2 parts of the story. That's only 2 parts of the story, Hoodie. You've got a concerted effort over the years to pull all these together into a system to control people, including your incomes. Then you've got to recognise the second point, which is that Liberal and Labor are working together on this and have been for years. The third thing is, these initiatives have been occurring in many of the Western democracies. It's being initiated above and outside the nations. That's what's been happening. So once you understand that, you realise that the people we think we vote for are just puppets of the globalists. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street.
Thanks, Malcolm. Ladies and gentlemen, Senator Malcolm Roberts flew in at 3 o'clock this afternoon, and we put him up first because he's got to go to the airport by about 9:30 to fly home again. Malcolm Roberts, thank you. Premier Cook, if you have any questions of our guests, please feel free to... Yes. We hope you're enjoying the grog up at Port Hedland while we're all doing this here. We are in the situation we're in. Look, there'll be those watching this online who are watching to mock. There are those watching online who are watching to denigrate and to ridicule, because we live in a divided world now. But those of you who are watching to do that, I want you to know this. People died to give you the right to give informed consent, which was enshrined in the Nuremberg trials after the end of World War II, to stop medical atrocities happening. I ask you the question I asked at the beginning of the meeting, and I'm looking at you. If you thought someone was breaking into your house, would you like your neighbour to tell you? If you thought someone was fiddling with your DNA or your immune system, would you like to know about it? And if you say no, you're a bloody idiot. So, like these people or loathe them, in actual fact, they're here for you too. So we hope that one day you will recognise that these things have taken place and maybe people were telling the truth all along. One of the great things that I've experienced through this whole COVID madness is the new people that I've met. People like you. People who are a new tribe, and we're waking up and we're helping others and we're learning more and we're coming together and we're connecting in ways that really help to rebuild the spirit of this country. One of the greatest things that I can recall from being through the last 4 years is the incredible people I've met, some of the guest speakers here tonight who I now consider myself to be personal friends of. One of the finest is our next guest. He makes himself available to anybody with any kind of a health issue. I'm not going to give his number out. He has led the charge for over 4 decades to bring real health into our Australian health system, which is not a health system, it's a disease management system. He has been at the forefront. He's built systems and had them destroyed under his nose by the TGA. I want you to give a very warm welcome to one of the finest men I've ever met, Professor Ian Brighthope.
Thank you very much, Graham. And thank you. I would never have dreamt that I'd be standing here in Perth speaking to a lovely group of people about an iatrogenic-induced disease, a doctor-induced disease. In the 80s and the 90s, I came over here for Dr. Ivy Bullen. The late Dr. Ivy Bullen was one of Perth's heroes in helping cancer patients. And I'd come across and go down to Jarrahdale and run a retreat and help people with cancer by using diet, meditation, supplements, herbal medicines, intravenous nutrients, all of the things that patients should get, but didn't get. And I never thought that my profession would end up causing the most uncontrolled experimentation ever on humankind. So, again, thank you and thanks to the organisers for inviting me here today, because I believe I do have an important health message for the entire country, if not the entire globe. So, ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, distinguished guests, and fellow advocates for the best of health, thank you for being here today as we address one of the most critical issues facing our society: the safety, transparency and long-term consequences of the COVID-19 vaccination program. Our discussion today is not about fear-mongering or conspiracy. It is about truth, evidence and the urgent need to protect public health. It is a privilege to speak to you on an issue of profound importance to the health and future of all Australians. An issue that concerns the safety of the COVID-19 vaccines administered to millions. You have heard from the previous speakers what's been going on with regard to the history and to the vaccination programs and to the science, the politics and the legal aspects. From my perspective, as a medical professional, retired medical professional, come out of retirement to retrain doctors and nurses and healthcare professionals in what we can do to help the general public who are scrambling for help, who are getting sicker and who are dying unnecessarily and prematurely. The concerns I have are based on well-established science. This is not theoretical or speculative. Decades of research have demonstrated the risks of foreign DNA integrating into human cells, leading to potentially catastrophic outcomes. The synthetic DNA contamination, as detected in Australian vials of the Pfizer and Moderna COVID-19 vaccines by Dr. David Speicher, presents risks of genomic instability, which can manifest as cancers, autoimmune diseases, mutations and hereditary disorders. The vaccines contain lipid nanoparticles, toxic, which encapsulate synthetic DNA fragments. These nanoparticles deliver this DNA into most organs throughout the body, where the DNA has the potential to integrate into our own genetic material. Every organ in the body, from the brain to the heart, the ovaries, the testicles, the spleen, the liver, the eye, the ear, everywhere. The scientific literature makes it clear that this can lead to cancer and cancer development, immune system disruption, infertility and more. Levels of contamination detected are up to 145 times the permissible limit. Some cases are extraordinary and far beyond what should be allowed in any medicinal product. We are already seeing evidence of these effects in real patients. Throughout the world, my colleagues and I are witness to a very disturbing trend that must be addressed. Patients who have been cancer-free for many years are suddenly relapsing with aggressive explosive cancers shortly after receiving booster doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. These cases show very rapid tumour growth following the booster administration. Very rapid tumour growth. The nature of these cancers is extremely unsettling. They are not just slow-growing progressive types we are accustomed to managing. They are aggressive, often presenting in advanced stages and affecting multiple organs by the time they are diagnosed. Excuse me. These are pancreatic cancers, a very, very deadly cancer. Ovarian cancers, difficult to detect until they are well advanced. Lung cancers and colorectal cancers. The colorectal cancers are showing explosive growth patterns, something we have never seen before. Something else that we haven't seen much of before are two very different cancers arising in the one organ. And in fact, there have been cases of colorectal or bowel cancers in which there are two different cancers, two different genetically determined cancers in the large intestine. There has been a case report of a woman with breast cancer, 3 different cancers, 2 in one breast and 1 in the other. This is most unusual. These turbo cancers are emerging faster and more virulently than what we would expect in patients, including in patients who had otherwise been stable for many years. There is also a rise in blood cancers such as lymphomas and leukemias, which are sometimes appearing very shortly after vaccination. The public health authorities are reluctant to acknowledge the correlation. This is happening across the globe where the mRNA vaccines have been administered. Australia has administered more than 60 million doses of these vaccines to over 20 million people. Australia's governmental health authorities have chosen not to monitor new or emerging cancer trends following the widespread use of these vaccines. It is troubling that the Department of Health has not made data on cancer trends post-vaccination publicly available. It is their responsibility to do so. This is a critical gap in public health oversight. Given the massive contamination levels of rogue residual DNA in the Australian vials, we must expect an ongoing rise in cancers and other genetic disorders in Australia. This issue is a potential long-term health crisis waiting to happen. This matter must be taken seriously by every Australian. We must advocate for immediate public health responses. We need our health authorities to begin monitoring these trends. Without immediate action, we risk leaving Australians vulnerable to a wave of preventable diseases that may devastate families and strain our healthcare system. These gene-based vaccines should never have been considered. The technology had never been proven to be effective in preventing coronavirus infections. The technology had been shown to be unsafe long before it was used in 2021. The delivery of the modified RNA in a lipid nanoparticle, something that would carry the drug into the depths of our brains, our ovaries, our testicles, our heart, virtually every organ in the body, should have been known by the authorities. The drug was never going to stay in the deltoid muscle. Furthermore, there was another contaminant in the drug, endotoxin. Endotoxin is what causes shock, and shock can lead to death. The contamination of these vaccines with synthetic DNA should have been caught and dealt with before any doses were administered. We must act urgently to mitigate the damage. The first step is to halt further distribution of these contaminated products. Furthermore, let us begin with a fundamental truth that has been systematically ignored. From the outset of the pandemic, the possibility that SARS-CoV-2 emerged from a laboratory was dismissed without proper investigation. This dismissal set the stage for policy decisions that lacked accountability and transparency. One lie and everything else was built on that lie, and it has become a disaster. Governments around the world imposed lockdowns that devastated economies, mental health and social cohesion, all without scientific evidence to support their efficacy. These measures inflicted untold suffering, especially on the most vulnerable in our communities. And I come from Melbourne, ladies and gentlemen, the most lockdown city in the world. And it was a hideous place to live. absolutely hideous. When we were allowed out, we watched people walking down the street, spraying door handles and lampposts, and it was unbelievable. It was like a circus. I could never imagine anybody killing a virus that way. Just unbelievable. The mantra, safe and effective, was echoed endlessly, despite insufficient evidence. Even the manufacturers of vaccines have stated that we cannot manufacture vaccines safely because they're inherently unsafe. The claim of 95% efficacy was a statistical lie. In reality, these experimental injections have been associated with more deaths and injuries than any other pharmaceutical product in history. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have undergone the most dangerous, uncontrolled experiment ever on mankind. We must not ignore or forget the ethical principles that were violated during this time. We must always remember the willful blindness of our leaders, political, medical, media, and scientific. We know who they are. Malcolm knows who they are. First, do no harm. The foundational principle of medicine was completely ignored. Every individual has the right to make informed decisions about what is injected into their body. You all know that. Full, free, informed consent must always be included, including the right to informed refusal. This is a part of the rules of medicine. We don't want repeats of drugs like thalidomide or situations that give rise to Nuremberg-style hearings. As I've stated publicly, I did this in a Senate inquiry, the mRNA gene therapy shouldn't have been injected into a single human being ever. I would like to see the halt of these mRNA factories being built in Australia. Now we face new mRNA vaccine proposals such as those for the childhood vaccine programs. Horrific. Our response must be clear, ladies and gentlemen, no more lies and no more experimental vaccines. Health, to those in Canberra, is a foreign language. They just don't get it. And those who are controlling them probably do get it and get wealthy from it. Thank God it only takes one man to stand up and fight. Thank God for Senator Johnson and his colleagues in the US. But ladies and gentlemen, thank God also for Russell Broadbent, Malcolm Roberts, and a few other Australian politicians. History will remember their courage. For without courage, there's no truth. And without truth, there are no other values. Another man, Dr. Fauci. He and I go back to the early 1980s with the advent of the HIV/AIDS virus. Dr. Fauci was recommending AZT, a dangerous drug, and withholding the use of a simple antibiotic, a sulfonamide, and allowing the HIV/AIDS patients to wither away and die. We applied nutrients, nutraceuticals, and repurposed medicines back in the early 1980s to keep our HIV/AIDS patients alive. Well, you know, I wrote a book about it, the use of nutrients and high-dose intravenous vitamin C to keep AIDS patients alive longer. and they did. I was reported to the medical board. I was charged with many charges of infamous conduct in a professional respect. But back in those days, we did have justice in this country because they tried to strike me off. I applied to the Supreme Court and I won my case. I can't say that I do respect the justice system in this country now. After seeing what's been happening in the Supreme and High Courts and being involved in one case myself, I believe that there is something seriously wrong with our justice system. As Voltaire warned us, Dr. Fauci, before I go any further, he said, when you make it difficult for people in their lives, they lose their ideological BS and they get vaccinated. This statement reveals a very disturbing mindset, coercion and pressure over free will and evidence-based medicine and evidence-based healthcare, which doesn't exist in this country. I was going to say, as Voltaire warned, those who make us believe in absurdities can make us commit atrocities. On the truth in science, if we are to determine truth about vaccine-related injuries and deaths, we must apply rigorous scientific criteria. The Bradford Hill criteria is used to establish cause and effect and not just association. So did the vaccines cause the excess deaths, the serious illnesses and the disease? Well, to many of us in scientific medicine, with a scientific background, the Bradford Hill criteria actually apply and have been met. There is no doubt that these vaccines are doing what we are claiming them to do. Furthermore, the evidence that the contaminating residual DNA, the rogue DNA, in the vaccines itself inserts itself into the recipient's DNA. That has been proven. Problem is, we don't know exactly where in our DNA this rogue DNA is inserting itself. And this is why we are seeing bizarre presentations in healthcare now. These turbo cancers are affecting a young population aging about between 14 and 40. They are explosive and often linked to the number of vaccine boosters. Mortality rates are high and the typical indicators of cancer progression don't apply. So it's a big problem. The primary cancer may be difficult to find. Tissue samples in the USA have detected the vaccine spike proteins in biopsies in the cancers. Yet here in Australia, we have failed to test adequately. Shockingly, the mRNA in these vaccines contains, as you heard, the SV40 sequence, and that is a cancer promoter. It's a sequence from the simian virus. It's something been around. We have known about it for a long time. A known cancer promoter present in both Pfizer and Moderna vaccines. The result? Unregulated growth and an increase in cancers that should have remained rare. Despite clear indicators for alternative approaches in both prevention and treatment of these cancers, funding for innovative research is denied and lives are lost unnecessarily. We are headed for a future where turbo cancers will become increasingly common if we don't act now. So immediate action is, from my perspective, essential. Health authorities must, 1, monitor cancer trends post-vaccination. 2, develop testing protocols for those exposed to synthetic DNA. 3, halt the distribution of contaminated vaccines and enforce strict safety standards. 4, conduct research into the prevention and treatment of vaccine-related conditions. And 5, commence educational and preventative programs at primary healthcare level. By addressing these issues now, we can mitigate the risks and protect the health of Australians Ignoring this could lead to a preventable public health crisis with devastating consequences. We have a vision for the future. A new Australian Department of Health and Wellness. It is time for a new approach. The approach that we've been teaching in a very small way to a very small number of doctors over the last 40 years. But it's great for me to see that doctors who are specialists now taking on the use of lifestyle approaches, diet in particular, good nutrition, and the appropriate use of nutraceuticals and repurposed safe medicines that have been around for decades. I thank Malcolm for mentioning some of the important substances that we can use. And I'll add to that right at the beginning of this pandemic, if Morrison, Hunt and Murphy had adopted a CD zinc campaign, we would have been out of the pandemic in 6 to 8 weeks. And nobody, unless they were over the age of 80 or had severe comorbidities, would have got sick, and we would have reduced the death rate to virtually almost zero, because you never ever, and this is what the public health experts need to learn in this country, is you never take a population of people or an individual into a pandemic who are low in those critical nutrients, especially the vitamin D. And you never, ever let anybody go into a hospital who is low on vitamin C and give them drugs, because they'll end up in intensive care on a ventilator and dying. We showed in some studies, and others have been done now, that you can actually take people off ventilators or prevent them going onto ventilators if you give them a nice big high dose of intravenous vitamin C. Thank you, that is safe, that is effective. It's time for a new approach, ladies and gentlemen, a health and wellness system that prioritises prevention over treatment, nutritional, environmental and integrative healthcare and medicine alongside good conventional care. I mean, we are the best when it comes to acute interventive medicine, whether it's trauma, whether it's surgery, whether it's anaesthetics, we shine. But all of the rest, we fail. Transparency, ethics and the empowerment of individuals to take control of their health is absolutely imperative. Finally, our councillors, our politicians and leaders have a duty of care and a responsibility to all of us. That's why they're there. So in closing, I'd like us all to remember the failures of the past must not be repeated. The truth must prevail over censorship and coercion. Somebody needs to speak to the chair of the ABC. Who believes that the ABC always tells the truth. I used to admire the ABC for its truth-telling, but it has failed. It has failed dismally, and it has built its information and its narrative on that one big lie. The truth must prevail over censorship and coercion, and the health of future generations depends on the actions we take today and tomorrow. We must prioritise human life and dignity over profits and politics. Thank you for listening, and God bless you all.
Stay with me, mate. Stay with me. Come forward. Look, we are running very much over time, but I'm sure you all agree it's worth it. The question I wanted to ask you before you left, I'd like to say for the panel, just to give us a bit more time. So, Ian, if you'd like to take a seat in one of the chairs, you could sit next to the Premier if you wanted to have.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'd like to call our previous guests up for our panel. Ian Bridehope, Roger Cook, Ian Bridehope. Take a seat, but please don't sit on the Health Minister. How's this one? That's better. That's better. You all enjoying this so far? Yes. Now, there'll be another Q&A panel at the end of the proceedings tonight, which will be great. It's a pity that Malcolm Roberts won't be here because he'll have to leave. But there will be a roving mic possibly available on the last one. So we'll see how we go tonight. And intermission will get you to go out and refresh yourselves and get back in as soon as you can so we can try and make up a little bit more time.
You can run on for a long time, run on for a long time, run on for a long time. Sooner or later gotta cut you down. Sooner or later gotta cut you down. Go tell that long-tongued liar. Go and tell that midnight rider. Tell the rambler, the gambler, the backbiter. Tell him that God's gonna cut him down. Tell him that God's gonna cut him down.